Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a movie that had some big shoes to fill. The first film refined what 3D animation could be while presenting an engaging story that felt fresh and new for the superhero genre. It won Best Animated Picture at the Oscars, thank God, and we quickly saw studios attempting to learn their lessons from its success. Animation studios learned that they could create more stylized techniques to create films that don't all look like Pixar's standard faux realism, and we got films like Mitchell's vs. the Machines and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, both of which are great movies. But the companies behind all the other superhero movies learned the wrong lesson. What's that lesson? Multiverse sells. Multiverse sells. Multiverse sells. Multiverse sells! Think of Marvel Studios' movies that tap into the multiverse. Spider-Man No Way Home was the best Marvel project to do so, but its multiverse usage was more of a contrivance to allow for cameos. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is a movie that has its fans, mainly for directorial flair of Sam Raimi and, But the movie was criticized by fans for making the multiverse boring. And I mean, who could blame them? This movie literally had a universe where all it did was change the color of the street light. Maybe I'm giving it too little credit, but what does it have? Exposition machine? The order of the shallow, uninteresting cameos? Yeah, no thanks, Marvel. So if this is what studios have to offer for multiverse movies, what happened? Was it a shallow idea? Did audiences get bored of it? Was the genre a one-hit wonder? No, of course it wasn't. Across the Spider-Verse proves that. Okay, so I'm talking about the movie. Across the Spider-Verse is the best multiverse movie that I've ever seen. God, I want to gush about the art, the soundtrack, and the amazing characters it introduces, but instead, I want to talk about the story. There is something fundamental about Across the Spider-Verse's story that sets it apart from every other multiverse movie and crowns it as easily the best one we've seen yet. And all that comes down to the stakes. Stakes are a fundamental storytelling aspect that are essential to keeping the audience invested. If there were no consequences for the superhero failing, then why would the audience care about what happens? So of course, an easy solution would be, if I don't stop the villain, he'll destroy the world, or the multiverse will shatter, which is passable, but with stakes like those, the audience knows what will happen. The hero has to save the day because in the end of the day, the filmmakers aren't going to let the world get destroyed, although that would be awesome. With stakes like those alone, it may be difficult to fully invest into a multiverse plot. But that's where these come in. Personal stakes. With personal stakes, it may be smaller scale logistically, but to an audience, personal stakes can feel drastically more important. That is, if you do your job right and get us to care about the characters. And Spider-Verse does a great job of making us care about the characters. Obviously, the first movie did a lot to get us to care about the characters, but it is important to think about how you reintroduce your characters to the audience in a sequel, or you might see the audience divided like they were after Star Wars: The Last Jedi did that thing that they did with Luke Skywalker. Right away, the movie gets us to care about Gwen through showing us her spider struggles with her father and how she feels like she doesn't fit in her world. When we're reintroduced to Miles, we see that he only ever feels like himself when he's Spider-Man, but he can't share that experience with anyone. The best way to endear an audience to a character is by showing them lose, showing them fail. Everybody loves an underdog story, which is why the character of Spider-Man works so well. For every win that Spider-Man takes in movies like Spider-Man 2, we see Peter Parker get punished. The same principle applies to Miles in this movie. It is also important to note that the movie has several scenes where Miles' dad is shown caring about him, and moments where we, as the audience, can see why Miles cares about him too. We see this with both Miles' parents in this movie, but I'm noting his dad in particular because of what happens when Miles learns about canon events. When Miles is told that his dad will die, that he has to die, the audience is just as concerned as Miles is. We see Spider-Man India's universe start to crumble after they stop a canon event, but Miles and the audience won't accept that this has to happen. So the audience is extremely invested in with Miles every step of the way as he betrays the Spider Society. And it was why the audience cared about the cliffhanger without it being cheap. Now, something interesting about this is that the audience doesn't actually know what will happen, because of course it is foreshadowed heavily that Miles' dad will in fact die. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen in the third movie if that's where the plot happens to go. That ambiguity lends itself to attracting the audience's attention because really, we won't know what happens, and we're dying to know. Something that I should note is that in an interview with the Rolling Stone, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, my boys, were talking about superhero fatigue, and many people were pointing out that in fact their movie, being a good movie, was not suffering from this. And their response was along the same lines. They think that multiverse stakes don't really work in sustaining the audience's suspense and actually investing them into the movie. You have to have a more personal conflict in order for the audience to care. In their direct words, I don't believe it's superhero fatigue. I believe it's a movie feels like a movie I've seen a dozen times before fatigue. If you're using the same story structure and the same style and the same tone and the same vibes as movies and shows that have come before, it doesn't matter what genre it is, it's going to be boring to people. And the audience in the theater can't be sustained on Easter eggs and reveals, or even these big, crazy multiverse stakes. They only care about, like, the relationship between Rocket Raccoon and Groot. A Spider-Man movie that does this really well is Spectacular Spider-Man, and for those of you that are as much of a Spider-Man fan as I am, you might be bummed that it's just no longer in production. Well, do I have news for you. There is a project, link in the description, that has fans working to bring it back, and I'm glad to announce that I'm officially a writer for the series. If you are a writer, animator, voice actor, or just someone who wants to support, make sure to check out the Discord and maybe use some of the lessons on stakes that you learned here today. But that being said, that's it for this video. And if you found that interesting, then make sure to watch this video next. Thanks for watching.